Well, as Julie Andrews says in the wonderful classic musical, The Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning. And the very beginning for this Singer Featherweight 221-1 is a rough start, to say the least. Cathy Colling, who is from Wisconsin, happened to find me on the internet, and I think ended up reaching out via Facebook, and told me that she had this machine. It had been in the family for a while. I believe it had been stored somewhere down in Florida, possibly her mother's machine. And prior to that, it may have been her grandmother's machine. So talk about providence and original owner machine. This is a poster child for that. And unfortunately, when it comes to machines that are passed from family member to family member, the result is sometimes that they go into storage. And this featherweight had been put in storage somewhere down in Florida for a period of time. It caused rust issues. It caused the paint to break down. It caused a number of other challenges with the machine. So the process that I'm going to focus on to start with right now is kind of taking you through the aesthetics of the machine as it started. Okay? So here's an opening shot, and if you can see it in the shot, as we kind of zoom in on the paint in that, you can kind of see where my starting point was. Real rough, very pitted, very varnished, just basically a mess. And normally I wouldn't focus as much launching into a premiere like this on the aesthetics, but let's just face it, featherweights are known for being pretty. And I coined the phrase princess of singers. Well, this was not a real good example of a princess. You can even see the screws that hold the plate for the needle and for the feed dogs. Even the screws were rusted. So, and that again, when you see rust on the surface of a machine, that's only pointing to the tip of the iceberg. I found a lot more inside. So here again, you can just see this is just an example of how cruddied up the machine was. Again, if you go to a standard sewing center, a technical location in your neck of the woods, folks that are servicing a machine are not going to go to this depth and this detail in trying to get the machine right again. They're just not. They can't. They wouldn't stay in business. But here again is near the motor mount of the machine. You can see we have a combination of just dirt, gook, lint, and even a little bit of rust on the back of that mount that the motor mounts onto for this featherweight. I'll kind of zoom in on the pillar here a little bit. You can kind of see on the pillar again and on the base as I come in on it. That's just not the way you want a featherweight to be looking. You can see the paint is broken down quite a bit. Here and there you might see a little bit of a shine peeking through, which was really the exception, not the rule, on this 221. Now we're looking inside of the faceplate, and again, issues with just general cleanliness, lubrication, servicing was really lacking on this as well. And you can see here on the shaft that comes down to the machine's not there. I'm not going to have any success. The shaft that comes down to the needle bar, and as part of the needle bar, has just a combination of gook and rust as well on the needle bar. So again, rust doesn't respect any boundaries. It goes anywhere that it chooses to go. Here again, we're just looking at different parts of the machine. This is near the faceplate area, and again you can just kind of see that's kind of an example of what we're dealing with here as far as the condition, and the lighting in this shot actually shows it much better than the previous one. You can catch a little bit of a glimpse of the bed as well, which is in a real rough state. And this, you know, again, Cathy brought this machine to me. The idea was not to beautify it, but she's prepping this machine to be a gift to a good friend of hers. And so it only made sense to me that if you're going to be giving a featherweight as a gift, it sure as heck cannot be looking like this. That would be, I mean, just a travesty. And here again you can just see, you know, the upper tension. If anyone had been able to sew with it, which they couldn't, because as I had shared in some Facebook posts, there were major issues down on the raceway. There was an issue with the hook, with just hand turning the balance wheel. The needle was striking either the bobbin case or the hook consistently. The machine would not even run. So that was some parts replacement issues that had to be done. But just the overall crud and the junk on this machine was also a major barrier. You can see it here, all the way up the extension bed. All over the machine. Anywhere you look, you can see the epitome of deferred maintenance on this little featherweight. And I'm not trying to make light of it, and I'm not trying to poke any shame or fun at Cathy. Cathy got this machine from Florida, I believe, from her mother. It is what it is. Here on the side you can see it's gone through a little bit of a time where it got scraped up, probably going in and out of the case. But again, just the overall appearance of this machine is not indicative of what you would expect to see on a featherweight. And here we're looking at the bottom of the machine. We've taken the cover off, and again the crud, the old oil and varnishing, the gook, the dirt, the grime, everything but small woodland creatures is residing down there in the base of where the motor would mount, and also where a lot of the other mechanics are on the bottom of the machine. Just another shot, and these are a couple of the worm gears, interlacing worm gears that are part of the design of the featherweight. And if you can't see it in the shot, they're not only grimy and dirty, but they're also bone dry. And these are going to be spinning up, certainly out of view. They're going to be underneath that cover on the bottom of the machine, but they're not lubricated properly with the grease. And also the motor assembly on the bottom and everything just shows evidence of all kinds of grime and dirt and buildup down there that is also affecting the potential of what this little featherweight can do. Just more dirt, more grime, more gook. Kind of see it right over there, almost running down the inside of the bottom of the machine. More of a distant shot there. And it looks like, yeah, these are again out of order. Welcome to Facebook. Facebook, when you post pictures, at least when I post pictures, maybe I'm the exception, but they never get them in order. There's a shot of the serial number, and if you were to look up that serial number, which is AL026817, you'd find that the birth date of this featherweight that belongs to Cathy Cowling of Wisconsin is August 11th, 1952. And kudos to Donna. When I had posted some of the Facebook shots, she jumped in right away with the birthday. She probably was anticipating an impromptu contest, although she's won contests previously too. And here again, you're just looking near the raceway and the hook system, kind of the bottom of the machine, and you can just see it's absolutely filthy. Bottom of the machine with the machine tilted back. Now here, one of the most central parts of the machine, and I've said this before in other premieres, is the raceway area. And you can see obviously here, I've taken out the bobbin case so you can see inside of the raceway area. You can see the hook. That's not just varnishing and grease, old grease and grime and dirt. That's also a combination of rust. You can kind of see it there on the left side as well. And rust, again, just doesn't respect any boundaries. When I took this assembly apart, underneath that you can't see where those two little holes are, it was even worse than what you can see here in the shot. And all of that had to be cleaned up and that rust removed and neutralized. And just trying to get that hook system back to a point where it could do its job. I mean, that's the brain bank of the entire machine, where all the magic happens as far as the stitching. So here you're looking at the bed up and kind of towards the raceway area. Just another shot. You can see part of that as well, and you know this, having followed me as long as you have. The foot control, along with the motor and all the other electrics, are a central part of that finalization process as well. When this machine came to me, it didn't even have a foot control. Cathy thinks it probably got misplaced in transit, so I had to source a foot control, new power cord, rewire all of that, make sure all the wiring was good to go. Also, it had a stretch belt on the Featherweight as well. Do not use a stretch belt on a Featherweight. The Featherweight between the balance wheel and the pulley on the motor has one of the largest reaches out of any of the Singer machines Singer ever made. It's about 17.5-inch belt between that balance wheel and that bobbin. And that's a huge reach for a stretch belt. Stretch belts are easy, they're quick, they're convenient, but there's two problems with them. One is they eventually will distort and begin to slip. But before they do that, while they're working themselves into basically the play of the machine, what you run into is there's too much tension on that pulley for the motor, and it ends up causing that motor to work much, much harder than it needs to work. Again, a Featherweight motor is how big? If you said 0.4 amps, you're absolutely right. That's not a lot of power. And when you add that extra tension on that pulley, causing a huge amount of drag using a stretch belt, you're fighting against yourself. So avoid using a stretch belt on a Featherweight. I had to source another V-style belt for Cathy's machine, and it is a lot happier machine. Plus, that motor is not having to work nearly as hard to get that balance wheel, that shaft, and eventually that needle moving. Just kind of another shot. It doesn't show up here real well, but again, just the overall paint patina was in real rough condition. Here you can really see it kind of off the top of the machine, down towards the pillar. And again, this was not part of what Cathy paid me to do. This is a perk that you sometimes will get when you bring a machine to the workshop, and I decided to devote that extra time to targeting paint patina issues with that machine. And here's the top of the machine. Again, more interlacing worm gears, filthy, dirty, rusty, and very dry. So again, as I showed in some of the other Facebook shots, which again, I don't know if my dinosaur computer will actually load them or not. If it does, I'll show them. But a lot of attention needed on Featherweights. It's a small machine. It's only 11 pounds. It's teeny tiny, but don't let that trick you into believing that it doesn't need as much care as a bigger machine, a much bigger machine, like Sahid's Singer 201-2 that you've seen some updates on as well. But again, look at that paint. Is that representative of what you would expect a featherweight to look like? No. And if you're giving it as a gift, that's not what you want to be giving, for sure. Again, just more nasty paint. And again, I'm a business too. I can't afford to, someone brings in a machine like this and it's just really, really crapped up as far as the paint patina. I can't strip that machine down, put new paint, new decals and all of that. I mean, if I become a 501(c) or something like that and people are making donations, then I could probably do that. But the process I took it through nonetheless was probably in all about 6 to 8 hours that I just devoted to trying to make this machine right. Here again, you can look at that take-up arm. It's a combination of varnishing and rust. And here inside of the faceplate, especially in the rear there, can you see that? That's all pitted rust inside of the faceplate area. You can see it on there as well, just behind where the upper tension would slide in. And again, that's all rust. So again, if you happen to live in Florida, I know Bill O'Rourke does, my good friend and moderator, be real careful if you put your machines in storage where you decide to store them. Because you can take a beautiful vintage sewing machine and just through the process of the environment that that machine is in, get results like this that cause a huge amount of damage. There inside of the faceplate as well. Can you see that on the left? Huge amount of damage to machines just by the choice of where they're stored. So be careful. Plus it doesn't help the paint either, as you can see. There, just more evidence of how junked up the paint patina was. I can't see if I've gone full circle yet. I think I'm getting pretty close. And there's a shot of the machine after I begin the process of trying to clean the paint up a little bit to get it so that it's looking better. And there we have gone full circle. So I'm gonna just totally go for it here. I'm gonna go back and see if I can hopefully and I might not be able to. Yeah. Guess I could pull it up on my phone. That's not actually ideal, but oh well. So let me see if I can, give me a second here. I really would like, because I know many of you that are faithful YouTube followers do not Facebook it. And I hate to have you miss out on things. It's kind of double duty for me, but nonetheless, you're worth it. I want you to understand and be reminded of the difference of my process when it comes to machines. And my phone is not ideal, but it's probably going to load much quicker than my poor Toshiba from the 1800s. Okay, not the 1800s. Close. Real close. Oh, Lord. That's so funny. All right, let me pull up these next shots and see. Oh, sorry about that. I just kicked the camera too. That doesn't help, does it? Oh, technology. We can't live with it. We can't live without it, can we? All right, I'm going to set this up over here by the workbench where I've got the featherweight, and we'll look at some of these other shots real quick. I hope I can do this. Might be able to do it. Yeah, that's not going to help. Okay, here's some of the other shots that I did as well. Where are we? All right, we'll come out kind of like this. We'll just kind of go through these quick. Okay, so here obviously cleaning, let me spin my screen around just in case I have to move or bump the phone or something like that. So here again, you're not going to get this if you go to your local sewing center. Just being honest. They're not going to take time to tear apart your upper tension. They're probably going to blow air through it, or they're going to do something else like that to simulate the fact that they've gone through and cleaned it. But here, I totally disassemble it. I tear it all the way down. Everything is cleaned. The parts that need to be lubricated are lubricated, and there's no goofing around. And here's the stuff that can hurt you that you can't see. That's all varnishing on the inside of the tension disc, and that's not the part of the tension disc that touches the thread, but it's all part of that mechanics, and any of that stuff again is not going to stay just there. It's going to migrate and move around that tensioner, and it's going to start to cause you problems. So you got to address it. There you can see the entire upper tension control disassembled, and even from this distance you can see the varnishing and the junk and the dirt that's on there. That's just the open well of the upper tension area. That also had to be cleaned up as well. That was all varnished as well. And that's kind of what we're doing here with my little poor man's Dremel tool, as we're stripping that stuff down very carefully because we're very close to the paint, and getting all of that stuff cleaned up. Again, even though you wouldn't be able to see it, I know it's there. I know it's going to migrate, and so I get rid of it. Again, something you will not get if you go to your average sewing center in your neck of the woods. And here we're looking at, obviously, I'm beginning to try to make an impact on all the junk and the dirt and the grime and the varnishing and good Lord knows what else is on there on Cathy's paint. Again, this is not part of what she paid me to do, but this is something I'm doing because she did share with me that this is going to be something that she's going to be giving as a gift. And I'm not sure what kind of work Cathy does, but she's busy doing different things, and obviously would not have the time, the tools, or the knowledge in how to do this in a safe way. Just continuing to plug away. It's a process. And here again is another part of the service that is real critical for optimizing a machine, is the feed dog assembly and the entire mechanics that drive that part of the machine. And you can't just brush them off. That's really the solution for most folks. They'll get a brush like this, and it's just from the top, even without taking the plate off, and they're hoping that that's going to give them good movement of material, even movement of material, and all of that. And that's, especially with a machine like this that had been let go so far, that's just wishful thinking. So it needs to come off. The feed dog mount needs to come off. You need to clean underneath it. You can see here I'm actually scraping layer after layer of crud that's built up underneath there, along with all the varnishing and some rust as well, and trying to get that clean. And then taking that assembly, the feed dog assembly itself, that part, and detoxing it, getting it all clean so that it's got, you know, not only the grooves, but all the mechanics of that. Again, dirt is going to migrate if you don't get rid of it, and all the other grime and stuff as well. Here you can even see on the back of that assembly, it's just caked up on there. It's just a mess. And here we're looking at the inside of the faceplate area. I'm beginning to try to break that rust down. Here you can, if you remember, this part here was just shrouded in rust and all kinds of other gook and junk. And we've got that nice and clean now. It's nice and bright, And that's what we're going to do with the rest of that area in the faceplate as well. All of this area here as well, we've got to impact that. And here you can see this is the end of that Dremel tool. I'm beginning to work my way carefully into that space and get all that cleaned up. And then I use a special solvent to neutralize that rust so that it doesn't come back. Here we're just looking at the feed dog area, and we're looking at the top of the raceway with that plate off. Here's our upper tension before it was disassembled. And again, these photos are never in sequence with Facebook, but you can just get a glimpse. Kind of move that a little bit. Yeah, you can get a glimpse. It's filthy. It's beyond filthy. Filthy is being generous. Here again, you're just looking at the feed dog assembly, making sure all of that's clean. Distant shot of the machine. Continuing to clean the surface and trying to get all that stuff pulled out of the pigments as best as I'm able. And I also mask some of the areas off as well because I don't want stuff falling in areas that I've already cleaned. And here I'm using a special solvent, the mystery solvent, as one of the people had posted on Facebook asking about what it was, kind of my secret sauce in trying to carefully break that down without damaging the paint or the decals too badly, because I'm not going to be repainting this machine. This is all going to be original paint. It's all going to be original decals. And I think that may have been, let me go back here. Give me a second here. I think that may be the end of that shot. Yeah, I think it is. All right, so these are the next group of photos that I just posted, I believe, a day or so ago. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. So look at how filthy that cosmetic pad is, and that's just working off the bottom of this machine. And here we're working with tweezers and trying to get into areas to remove some metal fragments that were in there near the worm gears, and just removing other crud that I can reach with the little tweezers. Here we're looking from the side, and you can see the new belt is on the machine now, which makes a huge difference. And it may be hard to see. Let me see if I can do it like that. But that's actually a lot of the crud that I took off the bottom of those worm gears and behind the worm gears. It's a combination of just gook and junk and also some metal fragments as well, like I was alluding to. There's the worm gears right there in the top part. Now, most people would never think about it, but you'll sometimes have featherweight owners that complain about they flip their switch for their light and their light will flicker. Their light may come on for a little bit and go off, and they'll think, okay, I've got wiring issues. It may not be wiring issues. There's two little contacts inside of the assembly for the light on the featherweight that actually will move in and out. Well, they'll basically extend out and they'll recess as that bulb is inserted and turned, and those contacts are part of the electrical field, and if those aren't absolutely clean as well, you'll have some of those intermittent issues when you're trying to use your light with your featherweight. Just hitting some of the key lubrication points on the bottom of the featherweight. Some of them require oil, some require grease, some need to be stripped of old grease and oil that's migrated. Here we're re-lubricating those top worm gears on the top of the machine, making some adjustments on the foot controller here so that it works better with the motor. More lubrication points on the bottom of the machine that are essential. Here's actually our bobbin winding. I won't call it a tire, I'll call it a disc on the featherweight because that's really what it is. But here again, if you look close, you can get an idea of just how crudded up, and this is representative of how the rest of the machine looked as well. Old varnishing, dirt, grime, and everything else that's even caked on the inside of this bobbin winding disc. And again, if you don't get rid of it, it's going to migrate, it's going to cause slippage, it's going to cause other kinds of issues. And here again, we're on the bottom of the machine and we're getting those worm gears properly cleaned and then re-greased again with the proper grease so that they are properly lubricated. More of that lubrication process there as well. And you can see it's not a standard grease, it's kind of my own mix. And I can tell you one of the things in the secret sauce for those gears is just a tiny little bit of, boop, I won't tell you. And again, some of these are on a sequence before that grease was reapplied. Also, I will tell you that where this electrical cable comes down to the motor, and it's oftentimes missed on that main shaft where you can see my lubrication point coming in. There's a key lubrication point there for the right side of that main shaft that many people, including technicians, miss. And I'm referring to this part right over here, right in that neck of the woods. So if you have a featherweight, you'll want to check that out and make sure that that well is not dry. Doesn't that machine look happier? That's a distance shot. You'll see the machine itself shortly. There's another shot after I've gone through the entire process, again about 5 to 6 hours, that the customer did not pay me for. And I didn't ask to be paid for because I knew that this was going to be a gift and I wanted to do the right thing. But quite a quantum leap from where we started. You can look at those photos again on Facebook, kind of like this one here, and see where we started and where we ended up ending up. Just a lot of challenges with that paint. Oh my gosh. There's some of the evidence of that crud that we were able to successfully get off. And there's full circle. And I appreciate you kind of sticking it out with me as we have to go between a very old laptop computer and almost as old of a semi-smartphone to be able to show you folks on YouTube, you know, that process that I took this featherweight through. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So at last, if you haven't been patient enough already, behind this little partition, and I'm going to turn my outside lights on. Behind this little partition is what I would consider a machine that deserves the title of Princess of Singers, because she certainly looks a lot more princessy than she did when she came to the workshop. All right, are you ready? I know you are. You're like, come on, remove the partition. Blah, 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 blah. So what do you think? I'm gonna move my little partition all the way over here now. Doesn't she look happier? Well, we're kind of far out, aren't we? Doesn't she look a lot happier than she did? And again, this is not my full restorative process that I would use on a machine when I'm taking it basically from bare metal to new paint to new decals to new clear coat and all of that. This is a conditioning process. It takes about 5 or 6 hours to try to restore as much of the luster as possible. If the decals are gone, they're gone. If the paint is all the way down to the metal, then it's all the way down to the metal. But the overall look of the machine, the overall impression of the machine from an aesthetic standpoint and a luster standpoint is significantly improved without having to do all of that, all those other processes of new paint, new decals, new clear coat. And also to the average customer, it's going to save them a lot of money. And it's still going to give them a machine that overall, if they're at a quilting retreat, if they're at a quilting expo, they're going to be able to take that machine out of that case and be proud of the way that it looks. They're not going to have to be like, oh, you know, it's a crudted up, nasty looking machine, which is how this one started. And they can still be proud of what they have as far as a featherweight machine. It's not going to be pristine, it's not going to be museum quality, but it's going to be very, very presentable. And I think I've accomplished that. And again, this is just something I've done as a gesture, knowing that Cathy's going to be giving this to her friend as a gift. And it definitely needed help. It needed help, lots of help. All right, getting a quick drink of, you know what I'm on a kick for now, and if any of you are on the same type of kick, or if you've been on the kick in the past, I really started drinking a lot of sweet tea. Really, really like the stuff, I really do. So again, we're just kind of going around the machine. It's not perfect, but it's a far cry and leap and bound beyond where she started. And I think that this is a featherweight now that you could give as a gift to a good friend, and you can feel good about giving that gift. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to do some sew-offs with this featherweight. I also want to give you more history and more depth and more appreciation and more understanding of the very complex history of the Singer Featherweight sewing machine. And also throw a little challenge out there in that, is this the real McCoy? Is the featherweight the first featherweight that hit the market? There's some debate over that. And I don't know if you found that if you're a featherweight owner and you've really jumped into it and you've gotten to the depth of things and you have been extremely enthusiastic about wanting to know all you can about the featherweight, if you stumbled across this. But that's something else that I'll touch on after we do some sew-offs with this featherweight, is some of the claims. Actually, you know what? We're looking at this beautiful featherweight right now that I've taken through a very in-depth conditioning process. Why don't I share some of that with you right now before we jump into the sew-offs? Would you let me do that? So let me start by saying that most people, when they become the owner of a featherweight, or as they're looking at becoming the owner of a featherweight, they do some basic research. And one of the things that jumps off the page right away as you begin to do your due diligence and you start digging into the internet is the fact that the Singer Featherweight kind of made its debut, some people debate, between 1933 and 1934, and it was at the Chicago World's Fair. I've shared that with you before. But there are people that challenge the claim that that was the first featherweight to come on the scene by saying the real beginnings of a featherweight was 1928. So these people are claiming 5-6 years earlier, by a company called the Standard Sewing Machine Company, they actually marketed a machine that was the first featherweight that came on the scene even before the featherweight did at the Chicago World's Fair. So there you go, a point of contention, a point of debate. Is the Singer Featherweight the real featherweight, the first featherweight, or did Singer, as he sometimes did, Isaac Singer was a real smart businessman, did he kind of jump into the scene and make a bigger splash with a machine that had already come into existence in one form or another by the Standard Sewing Machine Company? I'll let you take that to the mat and wrestle with it for a while. Okay, I've got a lot of other stuff I could share with you. I will share that after we do some sew-offs with this Singer Featherweight, okay? Because there are some other things about the series breakouts for the featherweights, talking a little bit more about the size of the production phases between those series, talking about the featherweight models that were made in the UK versus the US versus Canada that I think will be interesting to you. And I'll share more of those details after we've put this little featherweight to the test. And it is really cold down in the workshop today, so I'm hoping that that doesn't affect my success and what this little featherweight is going to be able to do for me. I might even give it a little bit of a warm up and a little bit of a rev up before I launch into things. So let me do this. Let me head over by the needle. And we say right about there. There we go. I think that's going to stay pretty stable. All right, let me warm this poor little featherweight up. Also, I obviously have to get this other material out of the way. You may have seen those posts on Facebook with these sew-offs I did after the machine was taken through the final phases of finalization. Really laid down a lovely, lovely stitch. I mean, is that really a surprise? I mean, that's kind of what we expect from a Singer featherweight, isn't it? I think it is. Okay, I think we got it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do to warm this poor little featherweight up is I'm going to do some good old U.S. Army grade canvas, but I'm going to get rid of these grommets so I'm not potentially dragging these across the bed of this featherweight. Not that I'm not highly skilled and couldn't probably do it successfully, but let's just eliminate that risk, shall we? All right, and we're not going to do anything fancy. We're going to kind of sew down, sew back, sew what, and see how we do through these, what is this, 2 layers? Yeah, it's only 2 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. No major deal here. As a matter of fact, that's a huge, crazy huge piece of material, but that's okay. I guess I can just, no, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it one more time. It's just too much material. It's huge. I can save that other half for another sew off on one of the other machines that's closer to being finalized. And that way I don't have to cut it again. All right, let's give this a little bit of a warm up first, because I think this poor little machine is really, really chilled. Oh yeah, it is cold down here today. We've had a lot of temperature fluctuations, and we are down in the nitty-gritty of cold weather again here in Wisconsin. Okay, I think that's probably enough of a warm-up. Get that take-up arm all the way to the top, and we'll buzz down and do a little bit of sewing. All right, here we go. And you'll notice I took your feedback, I think, very nicely. I do not have any music playing, because I got some feedback the last time that while music is great, it sometimes can be a little bit distracting too. Turn my original Bakelite foot controller, because I'll tell you one thing, I have big feet and I struggle sometimes with getting my foot all the way on that foot controller. Does anybody else have that trouble, or is it just me? I think it's just me. All right, here we go. Yes, I'm doing one of my little circles. All right, that's all I can do. Anybody else was getting dizzy or not alone, I was there with you. All right, let's bring that thread through, clip off some of these little tails. All right, finally got it. I'm trying to see if in the shot you can see that. So I believe that I flipped it a couple of times. I believe that is going to be, you can't even tell, which is good. But here you can see our little snail concentric circle there. Our stitch formation, even as we go through this loop and are kind of dragging around and around and around and around, you can see that our stitch quality, the spacing, the formation is absolutely as it should be, all the way through the entire process. I'm kind of looking back at the camera so I can kind of see what you're seeing. And yes, I am using white thread because, like I said in that last premiere I did, highlighting that 44S, was it, against the brother machine I had, I think white thread on video generally shows up much better than some of the other thread colors. They just create a lot of havoc for the camera. So here I'm flipping it over, and I believe that this is our lock stitch. I'll kind of rotate it like that. And there's no difference. Again, I think that that's the greatest thing, is when you can look at a stitch and not be able to tell whether it's the top stitch or whether it's the lock stitch. I'm going to bring my lights in a little bit as well. The stitch formation, the spacing, the consistency of that stitch all the way through, as we kind of manipulated the machine and kind of took it through those tight turns, is exactly as it should be. So I'm really pleased with that first sew off. I think that's exactly what we're looking for with this little featherweight. And I think it's representative of what we would expect. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and buzz through a single layer of this protected full grain leather. Had to think about that for a second. What do I have here? And let's see what kind of stitching we get with this little featherweight on this protected full grain leather. Go ahead and take that take up arm all the way up. I think we're good to go. And take just a slight adjustment on presser foot pressure as well. Remember, as you increase the density of the material you're working with, the thickness, making subtle adjustments with your upper tension to define that lock stitch, or making subtle adjustments with your presser foot pressure, is an okay thing to do, because it's going to impact the outcome of how that machine does for you. Okay? Alright, so let's buzz down this protected full grain leather. I totally have the wrong shoes on. This is driving me nuts. I've got my clodhoppers on, and they are just not designed for working with these little Bakelite, where you got to push the tiny little button. Alright, enough complaining, right? Just get it done, buddy. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to buzz down. I'm going to go ahead and turn, and we'll create like a little open-ended box with this protected full grain leather. Alright, here we go. Here we go once my foot control stops moving around. Ah! Alright. Alright, rotate that needle down, down, down. Press your foot up. Oh, perfect. It actually stayed in the down position that time. Yay! All right. Back down. told you a open-ended box, but I think I'm going to go ahead and close this box off. And again, we're talking probably 3 to 4 ounces of protected full grain leather that we're dealing with right here. I wouldn't say the greatest sewing job that I've ever done, but it's not bad. And actually I made an adjustment to accentuate that lock stitch a little bit more, but I may have gone a little bit too far because it took away a little bit of the definition on part of the top stitch area. And that's the balance factor when you're dealing with balancing the stitch. Again, when you're making adjustments between the bobbin case and the upper tension, it's like a tug of war. It's really like a tug of war. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the lock stitch first, which was my concern. As we're going through protected full grain leather, it's always a factor of, let me see if I can bring it even closer to the camera. When you're dealing with protected full grain leather, it's sometimes a factor of that thread being pulled back through that leather as it has to be done, and keeping that lock stitch defined well. So I increased the upper tension to do that. And it worked beautifully. There we go. Now I've got the right angle. It worked beautifully in giving us a beautifully defined lock stitch. You can see it there on the left as well as we're coming back up. But sometimes when you accentuate one thing, you can go a little bit too far, and you can de-accentuate, if that's a word. You can de-accentuate the other stitch, and all of a sudden it is not. Let's see if that camera adjusts. No. It is not as defined as you want it to be. So I'm going to go back over by the machine and show you what I mean. Yeah, that's exactly what we got. So here on top, when I was sewing here across there, I could see that I had adjusted it too far, and it's going to be hard to see it, but I had weakened that bobbin pull to define that upper stitch, and so I made a slight adjustment and moved it back, and then you can see that stitch starting to pop back through. Just like here, you can see that stitch starting to pop back through. And here in particular, you can see that stitch starting to pop back through. And then we got into a rhythm, and you can really see here where that stitch is starting to pop back through. Well, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go right down the middle of this protected full grain leather with that upper tension not as defined. I'm actually making a subtle adjustment on the upper tension right now because I want to show you the impact that that has and how that top stitch presents compared to when you turn that upper tension up, and you're going to get a really nicely defined popping lock stitch, but you can sometimes pop it too far, which is what I just did. So here we go with, I'm just going to go right down the middle of here, lay down a single stitch layer, and you'll be able to see what happens when we let that bobbin case have a little bit more of the victory and allow that top stitch to pop back through as it should. Okay, here we go. Come on. There we go. And see, our lock stitch still looks good on the back, but I had just made I had overcompensated a little bit, adjusting that upper tension, anticipating, okay, we're going through protected full grain leather, and I had done a number of sew-offs off camera with the same needle that's in the machine now, and I thought, oh, I better make it so that it makes that lock stitch pop better, but I had taken it too far. See how much better that top stitch looks now? As we have taken that upper tension, we ratcheted that upper tension back just a little bit, and now all of a sudden that top stitch, here I'll bring it up to the camera. There we go. Yeah, that's the upper one. Now all of a sudden we've given the victory back so that the balance is back in its proper proportion again. So when you're making adjustments, you know, whether you're me on camera, come on, whether you're me on camera and you're trying to show the impact, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm trying to balance this right here, and I'm just going to put it here and zoom in on it. That's probably a lot easier than trying to balance it there with the focus coming in and out and all that. That's just wonky crazy. Okay. So here again, let me zoom in here. Here again is after I made that adjustment on the first sew off, and you can see our stitching is looking better defined. Here it's much less defined before I made that adjustment back. But here we made that adjustment back with the upper tension, and that bobbin case can now win and be more in concert with that upper tension, and now all of a sudden our upper tension is not overcompensating, and it's allowing that top stitch to come through properly defined. Does that make sense? So sometimes, depending on the material that you're sewing on, you can make adjustments anticipating a certain outcome, and you can overcompensate, which is what I did. You can get a result like this where that upper stitch, you know, it's not bad, it's not horrible, but it's not nearly as defined here as it is here. See what I mean? I feel like an optometrist. Is number 1 better? Number 2 better? Number 1? Number 2? Number 1? Number 2? Obviously, number 2 is better. And that is not the fault of the machine on that outer rectangle where some of the stitching is not as defined. That's my fault because I overcompensated. So just remember your upper tension. Doesn't that look a lot better than the original shots? Your upper tension is going to define your lock stitch. Your bobbin case adjustments are going to define your top stitch. So if you do a stitch off and your top stitch looks okay, but it's not, wow, that's really spectacular, then what's happening is your upper tension is too high and your bobbin case is losing the war on defining that top stitch. Your bobbin case is going to define the top stitch, your upper tension is going to define the lock stitch. So we just made a slight adjustment and we took it from, okay, it's not bad, it's pretty good, to, yep, that's what we want. So that is just operator error. And sometimes when we anticipate certain things, we're correct. Sometimes when we don't, we're incorrect. The difference for you is you can do it in your home and you're just like, oh, okay, that didn't work. Here I'm doing it on camera live in a premiere and it's like, ah! But at any rate, oh, and I didn't even turn this around, my apologies. Just to show you that we made that subtle adjustment, got that top stitch back where we wanted it to be, but we didn't take a thing away. Come on. We didn't take a thing away from the lock stitch. That's our center one that we did last. Absolutely spectacular lock stitch in every respect. And you can see here, again, when we look at the back of this, even through the nap, you can see here where we had made that adjustment on the upper tension to really define and pop that Lock stitch. We did it. It's exactly as it should be. But we took away from that top stitch. And then we made that subtle little adjustment of taking our upper tension back a little bit. We were up around 7. We came back down to around 6. And then all of a sudden we still have a beautiful lock stitch. But also, as you saw on the front of this protective full grain leather, we also have a beautiful top stitch as well. And that's the secret to getting great stitching, is learning that material, the impact that that material is going to have on your sew off, and then making the adjustments as needed so that you get a great outcome. So it's not always going to be exactly as you want it. Just doing a quick wipe off here. It's not always going to be exactly as you want it the first time around. It just won't be. And any of you that sew in the home and that, you already know that that's the truth. It is a little bit of a trial and error sometimes, especially as you're dealing with different grades, different types of protected full grain leather. You're shifting between different types of leather, maybe Italian leather, and all of a sudden you get some really different outcomes. So blah 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 blah, and my screen is facing the wrong way. So what we're going to do now is genuine cowhide, and I brag about, after I've taken a machine through the process, how it can sew like others can't. So what we're going to do here is 2 layers, and I should zoom in on this. We're going to do 2 layers of genuine cowhide with a featherweight. No, I'm not joking. We're going to do 2 layers of protected full grain, or excuse me, of genuine cowhide with a featherweight. And I have not done this off camera yet, so I don't know what's going to happen. I may have to adjust my tension again to get the right stitching that I want to get, or it may just turn out perfectly, because I've ratcheted back that upper tension a little bit now. And you saw in the Facebook shots how that upper tension controller looked before I took it through that deep cleaning and got it back to where it needed to be. Trust me, if we had tried to do this with 2 layers of genuine cowhide prior to taking that assembly apart and cleaning it and getting it operating perfectly, we would not get the same kind of outcome. We just wouldn't. Okay, so let me make sure my take-up arm is at the highest position, and I'm going to go ahead and see if we can buzz down these 2 layers of genuine cowhide. And this is really wide, but I'm going to see if I can go down and kind of turn and then come back, and we'll see if we can then even gauge better how that stitching is looking. And if we have to adjust it, we'll adjust it, and then we'll buzz down the middle again to get a good outcome, okay? All right, so here we go, 2 layers of genuine cowhide as I try to get my toe, my big toe, on that silly little button on this Bakelite foot control. Ah! All right, here we go. I'm trying, folks, I'm trying. All right, needle down, needle down, needle down. Turn that now. Press your foot down. Needle down. Hoping I can get straight back on the path here. No, not even remotely straight. I kind of did okay. Again, folks, this is 2 layers of genuine cowhide. We're probably talking about 12 ounces of leather. We're doing it with a featherweight with a 0.4 amp motor. And I've got people that will contact me that have Singer 201-2s and other big boy machines, and they cannot sew at the level that this little featherweight is doing right now. That says something about my process, doesn't it? All right, let's see what we got here. See if we if we got that balance, that sweet spot where we want it, or if we're going to have to make a slight adjustment. We'll see. 2020, I resolved not to sweat the small stuff, and the small stuff is, you know what? It doesn't always turn out right the first time, but we can make an adjustment and get a great outcome the second time. Then that's a learning lesson. And I think my friend Piper from Canada had really applauded that philosophy, and he's right. He's absolutely right. Yeah, I like the look of that. I don't know if you can see that or not. So this is, I'm going to kind of go across. This is our top stitch. Where am I? This is our top stitch, which looks absolutely spectacular in every way. The spacing, the formation. I feel like I'm just totally dyslexic as I'm trying to get this balance from one side to the other. I'm just going to do one side. I was going to try to do the whole shebanger there, and that's just not working. So absolutely gorgeous. The spacing, the formation on this top stitch through 2 layers of genuine cowhide is exactly as it should be. Again, look at from the side. Well, we'll look at from this side. Probably can see it easier. What we just went through. That is no easy task, especially when you're talking a 0.4 amp motor. And here's our lock stitch. I just flipped it over. Our lock stitch is exactly, spot on perfect, exactly as it should be. The spacing, the formation, everything about that stitch is, I'm loving it. That's exactly what I'm looking for. There, I'm trying to get the upper row. I'm doing my best, folks. There's the side. There's our upper row. Look at those stitches. They're just absolutely spot on in every respect. Exactly the way we want to see them. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Otherwise, I'll try to lay these out on the bed and we can look at them afterwards as well. So, all right. So for the final sew-off that I'd like to do, I'm going to do some of this genuine elk hide. And I'm going to do a single layer of it. I think I could easily fold it. I might do that at the end. I might just do that at the end. I'll fold it. We'll do a single layer. We'll kind of buzz down a little bit. And then I'll fold it and then we'll zip down again and do the second thickness of it. Just to show you that when a featherweight has been properly optimized, it can sew leather at this level all day long. Again, we're not talking about any plastic parts in this machine. We're talking about forged steel worm gears top and bottom. So you're not going to break this machine if it's properly serviced and optimized sewing at a level like this. That's why quilters can just beat these little featherweights to death and they just keep on going as long as they do proper servicing and maintenance on them. Any machine needs maintenance, folks. Don't be fooled by that. If anyone tells you otherwise, they're selling you something. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and buzz down now, and we'll do a single layer of this genuine elk hide. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it, and we'll do 2 thicknesses of it. See if we can get through 2 thicknesses of this genuine elk hide as well. So let me take my take-up arm all the way up, and we will get this done. And I will put in a fresh needle because I did quite a bit of sewing with this machine, testing it off camera, and I want to start Cathy's friend that she's going to be giving this machine to with a brand new needle so that she doesn't have any challenges. All right, blah 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 blah. All right, here we go. A single layer of genuine elk hide. All right, any of you that were moaning and groaning and complaining about all my music, this Premiere is dedicated to you, because here you're able to hear the machine running exactly as you requested. Okay, so I listen, I learn. All right, let me take this out and we'll take a look at this stitch to start, and then I'll go ahead and fold this and we'll go through 2 layers of this genuine elk hide. Oh yeah, this elk hide nap, you really get an idea of the density of this stuff after they've processed it when you look at it like this. It's really evident. Okay, let me see if I can fold it a little bit like that so we can take a look at that stitching. I hope you can see that. Where is it? Let's go like, and I'll zoom in on these as well if I have to, you know, to allow you to see them up close and personal. But that's absolutely a spot-on stitch. Here, this is silly. It's sometimes just easier just to zoom in on the stitches instead of trying to go instead of trying to get them just in that little frame of the camera where you can look at that stuff. Oh my gosh, that is tough stuff. Okay, so here we're looking at the stitching all the way across, formation, the spacing, exactly as it should be. And look at the top little portion there. You can see the thickness of a single layer of this stuff, probably, I don't know, probably 4 ounces. And it laid down, I'm going to zoom in even a little bit further. It laid down a stitch that is absolutely break-worthy. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, so let me just come out a little bit. You can actually see it better from a distance. Isn't that weird? Let me flip it around and let's look at that lock stitch. Let's see if we should have increased our upper tension to define that lock stitch, or whether or not we have that sweet spot now where when we're sewing leather at this level, it's going to be balancing just beautifully. I think we're going to, yep, I think our balance point is beautiful. And again, that nap is going to make it a little bit more of a challenge, but as we go across, the spacing, the formation of those lock stitches, exactly as it should be. Yep, that's what we're aiming for. So we do have our sweet spot right now when we're sewing some real heavy grade leather. I mean, we're talking full grain leather, we're talking genuine cowhide. For us to get a real nice balance between that lock and the top stitch, we're wanting to, on this particular machine, be right around 6. And it may be different on your featherweight. On your featherweight, it might be 5. And again, a part of that factor is going to be where your bobbin case is starting out. Again, when you have that bobbin case in your hand out of the machine and you're pulling that thread after you've threaded your bobbin case, there should only be about 3 ounces of tension on that thread as you're pulling it out with your fingers. If you're pulling it and it feels like that bobbin case is really fighting you, then that bobbin case is probably going to be set too high. And in order to get a balanced stitch top and bottom as you're seeing now, you're going to have to turn that upper tension way up to offset the pull of that bobbin case. Instead of doing that, you just take that bobbin case out and adjust your tension down on the bobbin case, and then you won't have to ratchet your upper tension way up through the roof to try to get a balanced stitch. 6 is a very respectable number to be at, so our bobbin case is where it should be. And we're getting results. We're getting some real clear results sewing genuine cowhide and sewing protected full grain leather that we want to be getting. This is what we want to be seeing right here, where we're getting stitch output like that. And actually I've got a kind of a bad angle, you can't really see it quite as well unless I go super slow. So that's what we want to be seeing, right? We've got a good balance right now, upper tension, bobbin case, lower tension, and that's what we want to do. So let me zoom, let me first of all get this into position, and then we'll zoom down, and we'll see if, and maybe I'm pushing this featherweight a little bit too far. Again, the way this elk hide is processed, this elk hide that I'm doing right now, where I'm going to attempt 2 layers, is going to be tougher than the protected full grain leather, or probably any other leather that I could put this little featherweight to the test with, but I'm going to give it a try. And again, we may have to make an adjustment on tension depending on how this needle that's been used quite a bit off camera, on camera, depending on how this needle responds to this sew off. You know, hopefully we don't get any missed stitches, which again is not a problem with the machine. It's just an indication that that needle is starting to dull. So we'll see what we get. This is a live premiere. We'll do our best. I know the machine is great, but sometimes my calculations might not be. Okay, so here's 2 layers of this genuine elk hide, and again, I haven't tested this yet. You're seeing it for the first time. I'm seeing it for the first time. Let's see what kind of an outcome we get. Here we go. Oops, hold on one second. My thread kind of skipped off there a little bit as I was going. Okay, let's see what we got. I don't know what we're going to get. Also, you know, the other thing I didn't do is because elk hide and the way it's processed, it's going to be even a denser sew-off than the other sew-offs that we've done. I did not increase the presser foot pressure either. So it'll be interesting to see what outcome we get. You know, did the elk hide move as evenly as the protected full grain leather in the single layer, or are we going to see some sort of distortion? I'm seeing some good stitches right now, but so I'm going to put it like this because we can see clearly that this is our top stitch. We'll bring our lights in and let's take a look at these up close and personal. So again, 2 layers of genuine elk hide, the thick of thick, using a featherweight 221-1, and let's see what we get. I'm sure liking what I'm seeing so far. Oops, I'm going to move it with 2 hands so I don't get as jiggly. So I am really pleased with how these stitches are presenting. This is our top stitch. And this is the stitch that we had the issue with because I had increased the upper tension too much. Remember on that first sew off with the protective full grain leather? Here I left it in that sweet spot of 6 on that upper tension. We've got a beautiful defined top stitch. Now let's flip it over and see what we get. Again, 2 layers of genuine elk hide. And just so you're not confused, because we're going to have 2 stitch layers here, we're going to be looking at that upper stitch as far as the stitch that we just laid down. And you know what? I might almost argue that maybe it's a good looking stitch, but maybe if I were sewing elk hide all day long, I probably would increase that upper tension just slightly, to define that lock stitch just even a little bit better. So here you can see, and again, elk hide, because it's processed with chemicals, it's going to be buckly, and you may have even seen at the launch of this sew off, it was kind of springing up. So without increasing that presser foot pressure, we may not have gotten the perfect flow across, but still the stitch definition is exactly the way I want to see it. Exactly the way I want to see it. I probably would have increased that upper tension just slightly and increased the presser foot pressure just slightly. But all in all, that is a very good looking stitch. Again, the second stitch where we went through 2 layers is that top level stitch you're seeing, the one on the upper portion of the camera. So I am really pleased. This little featherweight came to the workshop and would not even sew. Had all kinds of challenges, whether it was rust, grime buildup, you name it. And we took it to a level where I think it's it's doing a fabulous job now. It's doing a fabulous job. So let me lay these out, and obviously they're not going to be in exactly the right order. I'll do my best. Middle. Okay, let me zoom in on these. These are the 4 sew-offs that we did live on this premiere, and we'll get a little bit closer to them and see if we can just kind of finalize in our own mind that the stitching is as we want it. So on the far left, we've got our 2 layers of genuine elk hide, and in my opinion, we have stitching that is absolutely brag-worthy, both with a single layer and when we doubled it up and went to 2 layers. Those stitches are exactly as they should be. Spacing, formation, integrity of the stitch, spot on, exactly. Then we did our protected full grain leather. Yeah, that's our protected full grain leather. And there we also did 2 layers. And boy, I like that white thread, don't you? And it just shows up beautifully. It really makes those stitches pop. And again, our stitch quality, the spacing, the formation, exactly as it should be. And then we did our 2 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And we did our little loopy-loop. And there also, and I could come off the tripod, but I'll kind of hold it real still. There you can see again the spacing, the formation, everything about those stitches is exactly as it should be. Wait a second, I call that, I'm on Minute Maid. That's our genuine cowhide. I called it protected full grain leather. And some of you are probably saying, well, wait, didn't you call that cowhide? Yeah, that's cowhide over there. Ah! Here's our protected full grain leather, our single layer. Actually come out a little bit. And here's where I made an adjustment midstream represented by that front row, and we got a really nicely defined top stitch. But as we were going down some of the other sides, it wasn't quite as defined because I had overcompensated. But we made it right, and the final product is an absolutely brag-worthy stitch. It's absolutely spot on. And you've already seen the lock stitches on all of these sew-offs, so I'm not going to belabor that and go through that a second time. Because partly I'm running out of time and I'm looking at a battery that's almost dead. And I should also zoom out real quick, and just come into the shot so you know I'm still alive and this is not a pre-recorded message on my part. And just say real quick, I really appreciate all of you and your concern and your prayers and your thoughts and your well wishes and your kind words as I recovered from my minor surgery. I really am feeling like I'm back in the game now, and I'm jumping into things fast and furious. So thanks again for your concern and your love and your support. So let me make another real quick thing here. I have some information I hope I can share before the camera goes dead. And I will zoom in on Cathy's machine as I'm sharing some of these details, because I think you'll find it interesting. Okay, we're literally down to 1 bar on the camera right now. Okay, so I already shared some of the details of the debate about the origin of the featherweight. Was it Singer in 1933-34 at the Chicago World's Fair, or was it the Standard Sewing Machine Company back in 1928? That's something you can wrestle with, like I said. Now, real quick, I'm going to give you the series numbers. And the series numbers are, when you're looking at a serial number like I showed you in the Facebook shots, the serial number on the featherweights is going to start usually with 2 letters. And I want to give you some information on the series numbers real quick in relation to those serial numbers that I think you'll find interesting. Okay, the first series letters that came out was AD, Apple David, and that spanned from 1933 to 1935. And during that period of time, there were about 53,000 featherweights that were made, and that's about it. The next series number for serial numbers for featherweights was AE, Apple Edward. And that was from 1935 to 1938. And there, in that period of time, there were about 132,000 featherweights that were made. After that, there was the AF series, Apple Foxtrot. And that was from 1938 to 1941. And there were about 166,000, almost 167,000 featherweights made in that series. Then there was the AG series, Apple George, and that was from 1941 to 1947, and there were about 148,000 featherweights made in that series. Then there was the AH series, Apple Hotel, from 1947 to 1948, and there were about almost 250,000 featherweights made in that series. Then there was the AJ series, Apple John, and that was from 1948 to 1950, and there were about 300,000 featherweights made in that series. Then the AK series came after that, Apple Kilo, from 1951 to 1952, which is right about where our featherweight on camera right now was made. And there were about 215,000 featherweights made in that series. There were 2 other series that followed that. The AK series from 1951 to 1952. Wait a second, I already said that, didn't I? Yeah, I did. See what happens when you're panicking that the camera's going to die? The AL series was next from 1952 to 1955. 284,000 featherweights made in that series. And then finally, the AM series, Apple Mike, from 1955 to 1957. About 200,000 featherweights were made in that series. Then we also had featherweights being made in the UK. And that started right around 1949 to 1950. And it was a combination of the 221K, and then in Canada, there was also a 221J being made as well. And the first series for the UK models was EF. And that was from, again, 1949 to 1950. About 60,000 featherweights were made. And then the EG series came after that from 1950 to 1951, and there were about 71,000 featherweights made in that series. Then we had the EH series of featherweights from 1951 to 1953. About 60,000 were made. And I think I'm going to run out of camera battery, to be honest with you, before I get through all this. Then the EJ series of featherweights were commissioned in 1953. About 5,000 featherweights were only made in that series. And it's worth noting that there were no 221K featherweights produced in 1954. And then the 221K featherweight manufacturing remained the same until about 1959. And then we had a bunch of other series that were all coming out in 1955 to 1959. EK, EL, EM, EN, EP series all came out in that same general window of time. And then we had, let's see, we had Canadian tan featherweights coming out from about 1960 to 1962. And we also had white featherweights, white colored featherweights coming out from around 1963 to 1970. And the tan ones and the white ones all came out of Canada. So I know that's a lot of information to dump on you, but I'm looking at a battery that's about dead, and I wanted to share at least some of that snippets of information with you because I know that you love to learn. And finally, last but not least, and I hope I can get this in, we don't talk a lot about the Singer 222, which is the Freearm version of the Singer featherweight. And that was only produced over in the UK, in Australia, and in Canada, and in the window of time from about 1953 to 1961. And they never made them in the US. I don't know why. But they just elected to make the Freearm 222s strictly over in Europe. So there you go. There's a lot of information to share with you in this premiere, along with showing you a transformed 221-1, which belongs to Cathy, that is going to be given to her friend. And we really put it to the test. I mean, we didn't wimp out on it and just do a quick little light sew-off like most people do. We did everything from protected full-grain leather to U.S. Army grade canvas, 2 layers of genuine cowhide, and 2 layers of genuine elk hide as well. And this little featherweight, this beautiful rejuvenated featherweight, did an absolutely spectacular job. So God bless you guys. Stay tuned for other great premieres like this, where you can see a machine that arrives at the workshop, is broken, rusty, dirty, all but dead. And we take it back to a point where it is beautiful. And not just beautiful, but able to sew with the big boys at the highest level and get the job done. And when I'm talking about big boys, I'm talking about this machine on the other workbench, which is also at the final stages of finalization, which is Shahid's 201-2, which will be premiered real soon. And I should not have shown it to you because I was going to put up a block and then show. Oh well. Hopefully you missed this premiere and didn't see it. But all right. God bless you guys, and take care. Thanks so much for being a faithful follower. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet to my YouTube channel, would you subscribe, please? And would you like the videos that you watch? I really would appreciate that feedback. All right. God bless you guys, and take care.